Welcome, my friend. Tonight we will travel far away to a city where art is exactly like magic. We will meet a young, talented girl who completely forgot her own true worth because she was too busy looking at someone else. Long ago, surrounded by high green mountains, there was a bright and colorful city named Luminaria. It was a beautiful, busy place, famous across the entire world for its magical glassmakers. In this city, skilled craftsmen worked day and night. If you walked down the cobblestone streets, you could always hear the loud, roaring fire of the hot glass ovens. These artists did not just make ordinary glass. They blew magical, delicate glass that held real, glowing light inside. When the dark night fell over Luminaria, the city did not need any street lamps or ordinary candles. The art itself illuminated the streets with beautiful, warm colors of blue, gold, and ruby red. It was a place of endless creativity and wonder. In a quiet, hidden corner near the edge of the main city square, there was a small shop with a dusty window. This shop belonged to a young glassblower named Clara. Clara was deeply talented, but she had a very special, quiet kind of gift. She did not make huge, loud, or heavy pieces of art. Instead, she spent hours and hours making tiny, highly detailed creations. She would sit close to her small fire, wearing a thick leather apron, breathing softly and steadily into her long metal pipe. Clara made delicate, glowing glass birds that were small enough to sit comfortably on your finger. Their glass wings were as thin as a single piece of paper. She made beautiful little flowers that glowed with a soft, warm yellow light in the dark. Her work required immense patience, a very steady hand, and a deeply gentle touch. People who bought Clara's art said it brought a deep feeling of peace and calm into their homes. But Clara had a secret, heavy pain in her heart. Even though her work was beautiful, and even though she was a master of the tiny details, she was not happy. Instead of focusing on her own hot oven, her own glowing glass birds, and her own steady breathing, she spent too much of her time looking out her dusty window. Just across the narrow street was a much bigger, much brighter shop with wide open doors. Every single time Clara looked out her window at that big shop, she felt a tight, painful feeling in her chest. She felt like she was shrinking. She felt like her quiet art did not matter at all. Clara had a beautiful, rare gift, but a silent, invisible poison was slowly destroying her from the inside out. That terrible poison was jealousy. One bright, crisp morning, a loud golden trumpet sounded in the very center of Luminaria. The sharp sound echoed off the stone walls and the colorful glass windows of the shops. The mayor of the city stood in the main square, wearing a long, elegant purple coat. He raised his hands to quiet the excited crowd and announced the grand exhibition. This was a famous, historical competition held only once every 10 years to find the single greatest artist in the entire city. The winner would be named the Master of Light. When Clara heard the news through her small, dusty window, a tiny spark of hope grew in her chest. She had been working on a beautiful new collection of delicate, glowing glass birds. She deeply wanted to win. She wanted the city to finally see her quiet art, to recognize her immense patience, and to respect her unique talent. But then, as always, her eyes drifted across the narrow cobblestone street. The large, bright shop across from hers belonged to Julian. Julian was a very loud, highly confident, and incredibly popular young glassblower. He always wore bright clothes, laughed loudly with the villagers, and made huge, flashy pieces of art. He was everything Clara was not. As Clara watched, Julian opened his wide, heavy wooden doors. He stood proudly in front of a massive object covered by a thick gray cloth. With a dramatic, happy shout, he pulled the cloth away. Underneath was a giant, blindingly bright glass dragon. It was almost as tall as a house. The dragon's scales were made of thick, sharp ruby glass, and the glowing fire inside it was so bright and powerful that it almost hurt Clara's eyes. Immediately, the whole street stopped walking. A large, excited crowd quickly gathered around Julian's shop. The loud, happy cheers of the people filled the air. They clapped their hands, whistled, and shouted Julian's name into the sky, completely amazed by the giant, fiery sculpture. Clara took a slow step back from her window. hiding in the cold, dark shadows of her own quiet shop. She looked down at her small, fragile glass bird, resting gently on her wooden table. Suddenly, a sharp, heavy, burning pain grew in her chest. It was the bitter, toxic sting of deep jealousy. "Why not me?" her mind whispered as a hot, angry tear rolled down her cheek. "Why does he get all the love and the attention? What does he have that I don't? Nobody cares about small, quiet things. Nobody cares about my little birds next to his giant, shining dragon. I am completely invisible." In that dark moment, Clara felt entirely worthless. She completely forgot about the hundreds of hours of love, care, and patience she had poured into her own beautiful work. She only saw what Julian had, and she hated herself for not having it. Instead of turning around and focusing on her own hot oven, she made a terrible, life-changing mistake. She decided to run a race that was not hers. Driven by a powerful, blinding jealousy, Clara made a very foolish decision. She looked down at her work table, where dozens of her beautiful, delicate glass birds sat peacefully. But through the eyes of jealousy, they did not look beautiful anymore. They looked small, they looked weak, they looked completely useless. "I do not want to be quiet anymore," Clara whispered bitterly to the empty room. "I want the loud cheers. I want the crowd to look at me exactly the way they look at Julian." So Clara did something that completely went against her own nature. She pushed her small, perfect creations off to the far corner of her wooden table. She gathered all of the raw, heavy glass she could find in her small shop. She threw extra coal into her oven, making the fire roaring hot, much hotter and wilder than she was used to. She decided she was going to build a giant, flashy, glowing bear. But Clara did not know how to make massive, loud art. Her true gift was in the quiet, tiny details. Her hands were trained to hold small, delicate tools, not the heavy, thick iron pipes needed for giant sculptures. For 3 long weeks, Clara worked in terrible sweat and deep frustration. The heat of the roaring oven burned her face, and her arms ached from lifting the heavy glass. She tried desperately to copy Julian's loud, bright style. She tried to pretend to be a completely different kind of artist. But because she was forcing herself to be someone she was not, the magic of the glass did not move smoothly for her. The glowing bear grew into a clumsy, thick, and ugly shape. It felt entirely unnatural, like a heavy stone instead of a piece of floating light. Still, Clara pushed herself, ignoring her own unique talents and the painful blisters on her hands. She was driven by the fear of being invisible. She wanted to prove she was just as big and just as bright as the popular boy across the narrow street. Then, on the dark, quiet night before the grand exhibition, disaster finally struck. Clara was completely exhausted. She added the final piece of heavy glass to the bear's head. But the giant, unnatural glass bear was not balanced. It could not hold its own massive weight. As Clara took a slow step back to look at her work, a loud, sharp crack echoed through the quiet shop. Suddenly, the giant bear completely shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces. The sharp crash of breaking glass filled the air, flying across the cold stone floor. The glowing light inside the bear died instantly, leaving the room in absolute heavy darkness. Her desperate hope of getting the city's attention was instantly crushed by the cruel reality of failing at someone else's game. Clara fell heavily to her knees. She sat alone in the dark, surrounded by the sharp, shattered glass of her copied dream, truly believing that her life as an artist was finally over. As Clara sat alone on the cold, hard floor, her tears mixed with the dark soot from her oven. Her hands were shaking as she slowly began sweeping up the sharp, broken pieces of the giant glass bear. The shop was completely silent, except for the soft sound of her crying. Suddenly, the heavy wooden door to her shop opened quietly. A warm golden light spilled into the dark room. "The glass is broken, Clara," a gentle, steady voice said from the doorway, "but you are not." Clara looked up quickly, wiping her wet eyes. Standing in the doorway was Master Lin. He was the oldest, most respected, and wisest artist in all of Luminaria. He wore a simple gray robe, and his eyes were filled with deep kindness. He walked slowly into the dark shop and looked down at the terrible mess of broken glass on the floor. He did not look angry. He did not look disappointed. He only looked deeply understanding. Clara could not hold her painful emotions inside anymore. The heavy weight in her chest finally broke. She began to cry with raw, brutal honesty. "I hate Julian," she sobbed bitterly, staring at the floor. "I hate him. He has absolutely everything. His art is massive and bright, and the whole city loves him. I tried to make something big and loud too, Master Lin. I tried so hard. But look at me. I am nothing. I am just a complete failure." Master Lin knelt down slowly. He gently picked up a tiny, sharp piece of the broken glass. He held it up to the moonlight shining through the dusty window. He shook his head gently. "You do not hate Julian, my child," Master Lin said softly. "You are just confused. You are letting a very powerful, painful emotion control your mind." He looked deeply into Clara's sad, tired eyes. "Listen to me carefully. Jealousy is not a dark monster hiding under your bed. Jealousy is a clear, honest mirror. It is only showing you your own hidden desires. Your jealousy is simply pointing to the fact that you want your art to be seen. You deeply want to be respected, and there is nothing wrong with that." Clara stopped crying and took a shaky breath. "Then why did my bear break? Why can't I be like him?" Master Lin smiled a warm, peaceful smile. "Because you are trying to be someone you are not. Imagine a beautiful, delicate silver flute. Now imagine that flute becomes jealous of a loud, massive, booming war drum. The flute tries to make that heavy, booming sound. What happens? The flute fails. It thinks it is broken. It thinks it is useless." He placed his warm hand on Clara's shoulder. "But the flute is not broken, Clara. It was simply never made to be a drum. You will always fail if you try to be Julian, because you were not made to build giant, loud monsters. You were made to create delicate, quiet, beautiful details. You must find your own unique identity. If you do not know your own value, you will always be a prisoner of your own jealousy." Master Lin stood up and walked slowly back to the door. Before he left, he turned around one last time. "Stop looking across the street at his light, Clara. Look inside your own heart. Build what only you can build." When the wise old master closed the door, perfect silence returned to the shop. Clara looked up at the large round clock on her stone wall. It was midnight. She had exactly 12 hours before the grand exhibition began. She had no time to build a giant. She only had time to finally be Clara. Clara stood up slowly from the cold, dusty floor. Her heart was still beating fast, but the heavy, dark cloud of sadness in her mind was gone. She made a powerful, life-changing choice. She walked straight to her window. Across the street, Julian's shop was still brightly lit, and she could hear him laughing loudly with his friends, celebrating his giant dragon. Clara looked at his bright, loud light for one last time. Then she reached out her hands and firmly pulled the heavy wooden curtains shut. With a loud clack, the curtains closed. The street, the noise, and the bright, blinding dragon were gone. She had finally stopped watching him. She stopped comparing her chapter 2 to his chapter 20. Clara turned around and got busy building. First, she took her broom and carefully swept away every single broken, ugly piece of the giant glass bear. She threw the heavy, failed glass into the corner. Then she wiped her wooden work table until it was completely clean, empty, and peaceful. She sat down in her old wooden chair, closed her eyes, and took a deep, soft, steady breath. She centered her mind. She pushed away the fear and remembered her true identity. She was not a creator of massive, loud monsters. She was a master of tiny, quiet, magical details. Clara lit her small oven again. This time, she did not make the fire roaring and wild. She made it warm, steady, and perfectly controlled. She picked up her thin, delicate metal pipe. She took her emotional pain, her bitter fear, and her remaining jealousy, and she used them as pure fuel. Instead of letting the negative emotion burn her self-worth, she transformed all of that heavy energy into intense, single-minded focus. Through the long, dark, silent night, Clara did not look up from her table. She entered a deep, beautiful state of flow. Her hands moved with perfect grace and speed. She began to build and design with her own unique gift. She blew tiny, perfect glass leaves that glowed with a soft emerald green light. She created delicate, glowing petals that looked as thin as real silk. She focused entirely on the beautiful, hidden details that only she knew how to make. The chaotic, painful distraction of looking outside at the world was completely replaced by the peaceful, powerful focus of looking inside herself. She did not worry about the loud cheering crowd anymore. She did not worry about beating Julian or winning the competition. She only cared about creating something deeply honest and true to her own heart. When the morning sun finally rose over the green mountains of Luminaria, the hot oven was completely cold. Clara sat in her chair, exhausted but smiling. In her hands, she held something the city had never ever seen before. The sun climbed high into the clear blue sky, and the grand exhibition finally began right at noon. The main city square of Luminaria was completely packed with excited people. Thousands of villagers, traveling merchants, and joyful musicians gathered together, all waiting eagerly to see the beautiful new art of the city. The air was buzzing with loud, happy energy. In the very center of the busy stone square stood Julian. He was wearing his best, brightest clothes, looking incredibly proud and highly confident. With a loud, dramatic shout, he grabbed a heavy gray cloth covering his work and pulled it away. His giant glass dragon was finally revealed to the world. It was absolutely magnificent. The glowing light from the massive ruby-red beast was so intensely bright that it felt like a second sun had suddenly appeared in the city. The dragon's huge glass wings seemed to catch fire in the sunlight. Instantly, the massive crowd erupted into roaring applause. They cheered Julian's name into the sky, whistling and clapping loudly for his incredible, fiery masterpiece. Clara stood near the edge of the crowd, holding her small, dark-covered object gently in her hands. In the past, this exact moment would have made her feel sick with bitter jealousy. She would have stood angrily in the dark shadows, crossing her arms tightly across her chest and quietly hating his great success. She would have believed the lie of scarcity, the toxic lie that his victory automatically meant her defeat. She would have felt entirely invisible. But today, Clara felt completely different. Her mind was clear and her heart was calm. She looked closely at the giant, glowing dragon, and she remembered the wise, gentle words of Master Lin. Scarcity says there is only one winner in this world. Abundance says there is an endless river, with plenty of room for everyone. Julian's beautiful, massive art did not make her quiet art ugly. His huge success did not steal her bright future. They were simply two entirely different artists. He was the loud, booming drum, and she was the delicate, beautiful flute. They were just playing different instruments in the same grand band. Clara felt a genuine, warm smile slowly spread across her face. She took a deep breath and did something incredibly brave. She stepped forward, walking out of the cold shadows and directly into the bright, warm sunlight. She raised her hands high and began the loud clapping of hands. She cheered loudly for Julian. She smiled and actively celebrated his magnificent win. With every single clap of her hands, Clara felt lighter and lighter. By celebrating someone else's success even when it was hard, she completely destroyed the very last piece of jealous poison in her own heart. The heavy, bitter rivalry was gone forever. She was finally, truly free. Julian had the biggest, brightest light in the square today. But Clara was about to show the city a completely different kind of magic. When the loud, echoing applause for Julian finally quieted down, the mayor of Luminaria raised his golden trumpet once again. He called Clara's name into the clear blue sky. It was finally her turn to show the city her work. Clara walked calmly and slowly to the center of the busy stone square. She did not carry a massive, heavy sculpture. She did not need 3 strong men to help her lift her art. She only held a small, delicate object covered entirely by a dark velvet cloth. She walked up to the long wooden exhibition table, placed the object down very gently, and pulled the cloth away. The large crowd leaned in closer to look, but their excited faces quickly changed to looks of confusion. Sitting softly on the wooden table was just a simple glass box. It was completely clear, completely quiet, and looked entirely ordinary. After seeing Julian's giant, blinding, ruby-red dragon, the people were entirely unimpressed. A quiet murmur of disappointment rippled through the square. A few people in the back of the crowd even began to whisper and point, wondering why she had brought such a boring, tiny thing to the grand exhibition. But Clara did not feel small. She did not feel invisible or worthless. She stood tall, feeling deeply grounded and completely confident in her own unique identity. She smiled gently at the confused crowd. Slowly, she reached into her deep leather pocket and took out a single, small white candle. She struck a match, lit the candle, and carefully placed the warm, flickering flame inside the simple glass box. Instantly, absolute magic filled the city square. The clear box was not simple at all. Deep inside the thick, clear glass, Clara had spent the entire night carving hundreds of tiny, perfect, delicate layers. She had sculpted microscopic, invisible birds, thousands of delicate leaves, and thin, graceful branches. When the single candle's warm light hit those perfect, hidden details, it acted like a powerful lens. Suddenly, massive, dancing, glowing shadows were projected across the entire city square. The tall stone buildings around them were instantly covered in a breathtaking, magical forest of light. Huge, beautiful birds of glowing white and soft gold seemed to fly gracefully across the walls. Soft, glowing petals of light fell slowly through the air, completely surrounding the people. It was not blindingly bright or loud like the dragon. It was completely mesmerizing, deeply peaceful, and incredibly emotional. The loud, whispering crowd became completely silent. They stood in absolute awe, looking up at the dancing light. Surrounded by Clara's quiet magic, the gentle, glowing shadows brought a deep, beautiful peace to every single heart in the square. Then someone broke the perfect silence. It was Julian. The popular boy walked slowly over to Clara's table. He looked up at the glowing forest on the walls with wide, amazed eyes. Then he looked down at the tiny, perfect glass box. He stopped right in front of Clara, smiled with deep, genuine respect, and slowly bowed his head to her. Clara's heart soared higher than the glowing birds on the wall. She didn't win the crowd's love by being bigger, louder, or faster. She won the ultimate triumph by finally, truly being herself. Now, my friend, let us look back at the beautiful story of Clara and the grand exhibition. Take a deep breath, relax your shoulders, and listen to her emotional journey one more time, simply and slowly. This will help you remember the new words and the powerful lessons. In the beautiful, glowing city of Luminaria, there lived a young girl named Clara. She was a very talented, special glassblower. Her art was tiny, quiet, and delicate. She made beautiful little birds and soft, glowing flowers. But Clara had a very big problem. She felt a deep, heavy jealousy for a popular boy named Julian. Julian was loud, confident, and very famous. He made giant, bright, ruby-red glass art. When the crowd cheered loudly for Julian, Clara felt completely invisible. She felt worthless. She wanted the crowd to cheer for her exactly the way they cheered for him. Because of this toxic jealousy, Clara made a terrible mistake. She stopped making her beautiful, small birds. She tried to completely copy Julian. She tried to make a massive, loud, giant glass bear. But the glass was too heavy. Her hands were not made for giants. The glass bear broke into 1,000 tiny pieces on the dark floor. Clara felt like a complete failure because she forgot her own special, unique gift. That night, a wise old master found her crying in the dark. He told her to stop comparing her life to others. He said, "Jealousy is only a mirror showing you what you want." He told her she was acting like a soft flute, trying to be a loud, booming drum. He told her she must find her own unique identity to be truly free. Clara listened carefully to the wise master's words. She stood up and closed her heavy wooden window. She stopped watching Julian's shop. She stopped feeling bitter jealousy, and she got busy building. She focused entirely on her own quiet, beautiful work. She used her unique gift and her deep focus to create a perfectly detailed, magical glass shadow box. The next day, at the big competition, Clara did something very brave. She walked into the bright sunlight and clapped loudly for Julian's success. She actively celebrated his big win. This destroyed the last piece of jealous poison in her heart. Then, she showed the city her own quiet art. When she placed a single candle inside her simple box, magical, glowing shadows of birds and trees covered the entire city square. The people were deeply amazed by the beautiful, peaceful light. Julian himself bowed to her with deep, genuine respect. In the end, Clara learned a highly powerful lesson. She did not need to be Julian to win the respect of the city. She only needed to be Clara. My name is Clara. Today, my glass shop in the very center of Luminaria is filled with bright, warm light and happy customers. But many years ago, when I was young, my shop was a very dark, lonely, and bitter place. For a very long time, a silent, heavy poison in my heart almost completely destroyed my beautiful dreams. I used to stand in the cold shadows, staring out of my dusty window at Julian's bright, popular shop. Every time the loud crowd cheered for his massive, blinding art, a cruel, bitter voice inside my head asked, "Why not me? Why is he so much better?" I felt completely invisible, small, and worthless. Because I wanted that loud attention so desperately, I tried to become someone completely different. I abandoned my own unique gift. I stopped making my delicate, glowing glass birds. Instead, I tried to build a giant, flashy bear to prove my worth to the entire city. But I was not built to make giants. My hands were made for tiny, quiet details. I will never, ever forget the terrible, sharp sound of the breaking glass when that heavy, unnatural bear shattered all over my stone floor. In that dark moment, my confidence shattered right along with it. I thought I was a complete and utter failure. But then, wise Master Lin visited my dark shop. He taught me the greatest secret of my entire life. He showed me that I was a delicate flute trying to make the heavy, booming sound of a war drum. He told me that my jealousy was not a monster. It was just a mirror, showing me that I wanted to be seen and respected. That night I finally learned to reach out and close the heavy wooden curtains of my window. I stopped watching Julian's chapter 20, and I started focusing on my own chapter 2. I realized a highly powerful truth. When you are truly busy building your own life and creating your own art, you simply do not have the time or the energy to be jealous of someone else. The next day, when I stood in the main city square and clapped loudly for Julian's success, I finally felt the heavy poison leave my body. By celebrating his beautiful light, I became truly free. I realized there is enough room in this world for both the loud drum and the quiet flute. I stopped fighting for someone else's light, and I finally started building my own. And so the beautiful, inspiring story of Clara and the grand exhibition comes to a quiet and peaceful close. When we pause and look at our own modern lives, it is very easy to feel exactly like Clara did in her dark, lonely shop. We look out of our own windows, or, more often, we look at the bright, glowing screens of our phones, and we see other people's massive successes. We see their fast achievements, their perfect relationships, their beautiful vacations, and their bright, loud lights. In those difficult moments, it is very easy to look at someone else's Chapter 20 and feel like a complete and utter failure in our own. Chapter 2. The heavy, toxic poison of jealousy tries to whisper in our ears. It tries to tell us that we are invisible, that we are falling behind, and that our quiet, daily efforts are completely worthless. But you must remember the wise, gentle words of Master Lin. Life is not a cruel competition with only one single winner. The lie of scarcity tells us that if someone else wins, we must lose. But the truth of abundance tells us that life is an endlessly flowing river. There is more than enough water for everyone to drink. If you were built to be a deep, steady, powerful drum, you should never, ever feel jealous of a delicate, fast, and beautiful silver flute. You are completely different instruments, playing in the same grand orchestra of life. The world does not need two drums. It deeply needs both of your unique songs to make the beautiful music complete. Always remember this simple, life-changing truth. When you finally know your own true value, you will completely stop being jealous of anyone else's light, and you will finally start building your own. If Clara's emotional journey helped you understand your own path today, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep, meaningful English stories. We are building a wonderful, supportive community of learners here, and we would love for you to be a part of it. I would absolutely love to read your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me, what is one unique gift or talent that you have? Or, what is one thing you will stop comparing yourself to today? You can also listen to this story again before you go to sleep to practice your listening skills, train your English focus, and deeply absorb this powerful mindset. Have a truly wonderful, peaceful day, my friend. Close the window of comparison and keep building your own beautiful light.